If you walk across an old stone bridge today, chances are you're not really looking at it. You're thinking about where you're going, what you need to do, maybe the cars behind you, maybe the river below. But these bridges, the ancient ones, they don't care about your destination. They were built long before your problems existed, long before your city existed, long before the version of history we accept today ever solidified itself into textbooks and museums. And if you slow down, just for a moment, and look carefully at the stone beneath your feet, you'll notice something strange. These bridges don't look like products of their time, not even close. Their stones are too perfect. Their arches curve too flawlessly. The way the blocks interlock, like puzzle pieces cut by machines, not hammered by hand, should not be possible for the centuries we're told they were built in. You can run your fingers across the surface of some of them and still feel the smoothness, the precision, a kind of intentional craftsmanship that seems almost surgical. You can stand underneath the arch and hear the faint echo bounce between the stones, as if the bridge itself is whispering something. Something old, something careful, something forgotten. We've preserved these structures as landmarks, as cultural relics, as tourist attractions. But we rarely ask the real question. How were they built? Not in theory, not in the official way, but in reality. How did people centuries ago, supposedly using wooden scaffolding, ropes, chisels, and manpower, create a stone arch so perfect that it has survived floods, earthquakes, wars, and the decay of time, while our modern bridges crumble in a few decades? Why does the geometry feel beyond medieval mathematics? Why do some of these bridges have cut patterns so precise that even modern stonemasons admit they cannot replicate them? And perhaps the most important question of all, why do these bridges feel older than the history attached to them? When you begin to look deeper, patterns appear. The same arch proportions repeat across continents, across cultures that supposedly never interacted. Identical keystone alignments show up in Europe, Asia, the Middle East, matching too closely to be coincidence. Foundations beneath some bridges appear centuries, sometimes millennia, older than the structure above them. It's almost as if these bridges didn't belong to one empire, or one era, or one culture. It's as if they belong to a world that came before, a world we've been taught not to remember. And before we go deeper into this story, because what comes next only gets stranger, I want to invite you to do one thing. If mysteries like this fascinate you, if forgotten civilizations, impossible architecture, and the erased chapters of our past matter to you, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Not for the numbers, but because every video we're about to explore builds on the last. And once you see the full picture, you will never look at the world the same way again. Now, let's go back to the bridge you were standing on. Look at the stones again. Some blocks weigh several tons each, more than any group of laborers could realistically lift with ropes and human force alone. Some bridges are built in locations so inaccessible that even modern machines would struggle to reach them, yet they sit there perfectly balanced, perfectly symmetrical, perfectly aligned to the river's flow below. Many have survived for hundreds, sometimes more than 1,000 years, while everything around them, houses, markets, even entire towns, vanished long ago. And the official explanation for all of this is always the same, nearly word for word, no matter which country you research. This bridge was built using local stone, manual labor, and traditional methods. That's it. As if that sentence alone answers every anomaly, every impossible detail, every contradiction. But once you start reading old journals, archived maps, forgotten photographs, something strange happens. The story stops making sense. Some bridges appear on maps decades before their official construction date. Others are painted in artwork from earlier centuries, standing exactly as they do today. Some have no construction records at all, nothing, no sketches, no engineering notes, no documentation you would expect for a monumental structure requiring years of labor. It's as though these bridges simply appear in the historical record, fully formed, perfectly built, already ancient. And when you realize that, when you understand that these structures weren't recorded being built, they were simply inherited, everything changes. You start to ask questions you were never meant to ask. Who built these bridges? When? With what technology? Why do they share identical designs across continents? And why do the records surrounding them feel so empty, so generic, so intentionally vague? What we uncover in the next episodes takes us far deeper, into archives, into foundations beneath these bridges, into stonework that hints at lost knowledge, lost engineering, and lost civilization, into patterns that reveal a world erased not by time, but by choice. Because these bridges, they aren't just old, they are out of place, out of time, and possibly out of the version of history we've been allowed to believe. And this is only the beginning. Once you begin noticing the impossibilities in these old bridges, you can't unsee them. Suddenly, every arch makes you pause. Every carved stone feels suspicious. Every perfectly measured curve becomes a clue rather than an ornament. Because if you look closely, really closely, you start realizing something very strange. The people credited with building these bridges were not capable of doing what they are credited for, not with the tools they supposedly had, not with the mathematics they supposedly knew, not with the timelines they were supposedly working under. And the more you compare what we see with what we're told, the deeper the cracks become. Take the stones themselves. In many ancient bridges across Europe and Asia, the stones used in the lower layers are dramatically different from the ones above. The lower stones are larger, sometimes monstrously large, cut with precision so tight that you cannot slip a blade between them. They are smoother, harder, more resistant to erosion, as if they were forged with a different technology entirely. And the official narrative always explains this away with the same sentence. They used whatever materials were available. But this isn't whatever was available. This is intentional engineering. A deliberate choice to use megalithic stones at the foundation and smaller stones above. A building method far closer to what we see in ancient sites like Sacsayhuaman, Baalbek, or the megalithic walls of Japan, than anything from the medieval or early modern era, and that inconsistency shows up everywhere. The lower stones survive the test of centuries. The upper stones crumble. The lower portions look ancient, almost prehistoric, while the upper portions match the era assigned to them. It's almost as if someone found something older and simply built on top of it. Inherited architecture masquerading as original construction. But the most unsettling inconsistencies appear not in the stones, but in the records. In Europe alone, there are hundreds of bridges listed as being built between the 16th and 19th centuries. Yet for many of them, there is almost no documentation of the building process. Bridges that required years of labor, logistical planning, quarry operations, labor contracts, shipments, scaffolding systems, all reduced to a single sentence in the archives. Construction began in Das and finished in Arsas. No blueprints, no ledger books, no construction drawings, no description of workers or methods. No explanation of how materials weighing tens of tons were transported across mountains and valleys. Just a date. Sometimes even the date feels suspiciously generic. Built around the 1700s, likely completed in the 1800s. Exact origins unknown. And here's where things get very interesting. Some of these bridges appear on maps decades before their supposed construction date. Some appear in paintings even earlier, paintings of cities and landscapes where the bridge is already complete, already aged, already weathered. Which means one of two things. Either the official dates are wrong, or the bridges are far, far older than we are being told. And as you might expect, the old photographs make the mystery even deeper. The earliest photographs of these bridges, often taken in the 1800s, capture details that no longer exist. Ornate carvings that have since been chipped away, massive arch flourishes that were removed, tower-like structures on the bridges that mysteriously disappeared in later decades, decorative elements that do not resemble medieval or early modern craftsmanship, but something else entirely, a symmetry, a geometry, a design language that we see again and again in structures associated with a civilization many believe was erased. Tartaria, a lost world that built with purpose, with resonance, with power, with an understanding of nature that we have forgotten. And once you see that architectural fingerprint, you see it everywhere. Bridges with arches that match old Tartarian windows. Stone carvings identical to Tartarian patterns found in palaces and city halls. Even the spacing of the piers, the amount of distance between the supports, matches a recurring ratio used across Tartarian buildings. How does a bridge in Prague match the proportions of a palace in Moscow, or a viaduct in Persia, or a gate in Nepal, or a dam in China? These cultures were supposedly isolated, separated by geography, by politics, by time. Yet their bridges share the same geometric language. And there's more. Some bridges don't just rest over rivers. They interact with them. Their foundations are shaped in ways that redirect water flow, amplify currents, or stabilize nearby soil. Some foundations appear to function almost like energy collectors, designed to resonate with the constant movement of the river. This is not medieval thinking. This is not primitive engineering. This is an understanding of harmonics and natural forces that goes far beyond anything officially taught in pre-industrial history. Some early travelers even wrote strange descriptions, brief notes that most historians now ignore. Descriptions of bridges that seem to hum in certain weather. Descriptions of stones that vibrated softly underfoot. Descriptions of sound carrying unusually far when spoken beneath an arch. What could cause that? Natural resonance? Or deliberate engineering? You begin to see why so many old bridges were altered or destroyed in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Carvings removed, pillars replaced, arches widened, foundations reinforced, or buried entirely. Were these restorations, or were they erasures? A systematic removal of details that might expose a truth that doesn't fit our history. Because once you understand that these bridges were not simply built, but designed to interact with nature, to resonate, to last, to stand against time itself, you begin to realize something that's difficult to unthink. These bridges might not be from our era at all. They might be remnants, leftovers, survivors of a world-ending event long before our history began. A civilization wiped away, whose architecture survived only because stone remembers, even when people do not. And the bridges, they are the last quiet witnesses, silent but not dead, ancient but not asleep, still standing in our world while belonging to another. The deeper you dig into these ancient bridges, the more one detail keeps returning like an echo in a quiet valley. The foundations don't match the bridges above them. In almost every case, whether in Europe, Asia, or the Middle East, the lower layers of stone look older, heavier, smoother, and impossibly precise. Stones so large that modern engineers struggle to explain how they were placed, let alone shaped. Stones cut with angles far too perfect for chisels. Stones so erosion resistant that they seem immune to time itself. These foundations are silent confessionals. They tell a story older than the official timeline. A story buried beneath centuries of renovations and rebranding. When you kneel down beside these lower stones, you see a kind of mastery that simply doesn't appear in medieval or Renaissance construction. Machines would be needed. Advanced lifting, precision cutting, geometry and physics far beyond the understanding of guild laborers. Yet the history books say, built by hand. And that's where the facade begins to crack. Because the truth is, no one today can explain how these foundations were created. Not archaeologists, not architects, not engineers, not masons. In fact, many modern stonemasons openly admit something surprising, that the lower stones of these bridges are not carvings. They are cast stones, molded into shape, fused with chemical precision. But casting stone, using ancient geopolymer technology, using formulas we supposedly discovered only in the last century, that would mean whoever built these bridges had knowledge that humans were not supposed to have yet. And that's just the beginning. Because the foundations aren't just old, they're misaligned with the upper layers. You can see it when the sunlight hits the stones at the right angle. Two architectural languages sitting on top of each other. Two timelines fused into one structure. Two civilizations sharing the same bridge. One ancient and forgotten, one recent and claiming credit. Look closely at the seam where the old meets the new. It's like seeing two worlds touch, two stories pressed together. Above the seam, the stones are uneven, hand-cut, chipped, imperfect. Below the seam, they are flawless, laser straight, smooth, fitted like puzzle pieces. It's as if the builders of the upper portion had no idea how the lower portion was made. They inherited the foundation, couldn't match it, and simply built on top of it. A patchwork of civilizations, layered like geological history. And then, the strangest evidence of all appears in old photographs. Photographs taken in the late 1800s and early 1900s, the earliest decades of photography, that show these bridges before modern renovations. These photos are the closest thing we have to a time machine. They show details the human eye can no longer find today. Details that were removed, altered, or mysteriously destroyed. In many photos, you see carvings along the arches that no longer exist. Interlocking spirals, sunburst patterns, geometric forms that match structures linked to Tartaria. You see strange metallic components embedded in the stone, now removed, as if the bridges had once been part of some electric or energetic system. You see ornate towers and spires that once rose from the middle of the bridge, later demolished, erased from the skyline. Ask yourself this: why would anyone destroy these details? Why remove towers that stood for centuries? Why chip away carvings that had survived storms, wars, floods? It wasn't weather. It wasn't decay. It wasn't natural erosion. It was intentional. Somewhere between the late 1800s and the early 1900s, a global wave of bridge restoration projects swept across Europe. But these restorations didn't restore anything. They simplified, they removed, they replaced. Everything ornate became plain. Everything symbolic became blank. Everything mysterious became updated. Some bridges were stripped so aggressively that they no longer resemble the original photographs. Like ancient faces carved from stone, their expressions erased to fit a new narrative. Why? Why wipe away the fingerprints of the past? Some researchers argue it was for safety, Others say modernization, but the more you study the before and after photos, the more intentional it looks, as if the old world was being scrubbed out, as if someone wanted to hide the truth that these bridges once belonged to a civilization far more advanced than the ones claiming credit. And then there are the bridges with no foundation records at all, no quarry logs, no labor records, no design notes, no financing documents. For some of the largest bridges in Europe, you could fill an entire archive with the paperwork required. Yet what we have instead is this, built between 1700 and 1750. That's not a record, that's an excuse. Bridges that required hundreds of laborers, thousands of tons of stone, decades of work, entire river diversions, specialized tools, somehow left behind no documentation, not a single blueprint, not even a sketch. And then you realize something. The earliest photographs don't show these bridges under construction. They show them already standing, already weathered, already old, as if they were never built during that era, only rediscovered, inherited, adopted, claimed. Everywhere you look, the same story repeats. The oldest stones are too perfect. The upper stones are too primitive. The timelines don't match. The records don't exist. The photographs contradict everything. It's as if modern history is trying, desperately, to stitch together a story that was never theirs to begin with. Because if the foundations of these bridges were built by a civilization we don't acknowledge, then the bridges themselves are evidence. Evidence of something older, stronger, more advanced. Evidence of a world that once understood resonance, geometry, vibration, and built structures not just to stand, but to live. Evidence of Tartaria. And this is where the mystery breaks open. Because what comes next is the first undeniable proof that these bridges do not belong to the civilizations credited for them. In the next part, we examine a bridge so massive, so precise, and so impossibly ancient that even the official archives cannot explain its existence. A bridge where foundations predate the empire that supposedly built it, where stones show machining marks centuries before machines existed, and where early photographs reveal details that quietly vanished from history. A bridge that forces us to confront the question, did we build these bridges, or did we inherit them? And the answer changes everything. There is one bridge, one structure that exposes the entire problem with our historical timeline. A bridge so massive, so mathematically perfect, and so suspiciously ancient in design that even official historians quietly disagree about when it was built. A bridge that, once you truly study it, forces you to admit that something is wrong with our understanding of the past. It sits there as if nothing is unusual, as if it belongs, as if it isn't hiding a secret woven deep into its stones. But the deeper you go, the stranger it becomes. At first glance, you see a masterpiece of early engineering, a triumph, a landmark, a celebrated achievement of its era. That's the surface level reaction. But stay there long enough. Look long enough. Look without assuming the history you've been told, and the facade begins to peel away. The bridge looks medieval, but the foundations look older than medieval. The stones look older than Rome. The geometry looks older than recorded human civilization itself. You begin to see what shouldn't be there. Machining marks on stone blocks that were supposedly carved by hand. Interlocking joints that look poured, not chiseled. curvatures that reveal mathematical ratios we didn't supposedly understand until the 19th or even 20th century. And then there's the real problem. The bridge exists in paintings centuries before its construction. Paintings that show it fully intact, fully formed, as if the artist didn't capture a new structure, but an ancient one that had already stood there for generations. Look at the earliest drawings. Look at the earliest maps. Look at the earliest lithographs. The bridge is always already there. So who built it? Was it really constructed in the century historians claim? Or was that merely the century in which someone patched it, restored it, reclaimed it? Because the moment you try to trace the construction records, that's where the story collapses. The official archives say the bridge was built across certain years, yet there are no sketches, no detailed descriptions, no step-by-step accounting of the engineering process, nothing. A structure that required years of labor, a monumental workforce, a logistical undertaking across rivers, quarries, and transportation networks, somehow left behind less documentation than the construction of a barn. And then there's the biggest red flag of all. The bridge's oldest stones, the ones closest to the river, show floodwear patterns far older than the dates assigned. Erosion that takes centuries, not decades. Surface smoothing that takes millennia, not lifetimes. The river itself tells the truth. The stones have been sitting in flowing water for far longer than the official construction date allows. Long before the era the textbooks credit, long before the empires assigned to its creation existed, long before the nation itself formed. Which means one thing: this bridge did not begin with the people who claimed it. They found it, inherited it, repurposed it. And that's exactly the pattern you see in Tartarian architecture. Structures found, not built, then claimed, renamed, redated, and rewritten to fit the approved timeline. But the most chilling evidence comes from renovation reports. Because every great bridge in Europe, every single one, underwent renovations in the late 1800s or early 1900s. And these renovation reports quietly admit something unusual. Original stonework, unlike known methods. Unreplicable designs. Techniques lost to time. Unknown tooling marks. Stone density inconsistent with regional quarries. In some cases, renovators literally wrote, "We do not know how this was carved." Think about that. Stonemasons with industrial-era tools could not recreate the stonework of people supposedly working with chisels and wooden scaffolding centuries earlier. Does that make sense? Or does it suggest something else? That the lower portions of these bridges were made using a lost technology, a form of stone casting or stone shaping reminiscent of geopolymer techniques, the same kind suspected at megalithic sites around the world. And then you find the missing pieces. Photographs taken before modernization that reveal what we were never meant to see. Ornate spirals carved into the arches, gone today. Geometric symbols etched into the keystone, destroyed. Tower structures rising from the bridge, removed. Strange metallic rods embedded in the stone, mysteriously extracted. Decorative lattices matching Tartarian architecture, scraped away. It's always the same pattern. First the photographs appear, then renovations happen, then the original details disappear. If these decorations were simply old-fashioned, why not preserve them? Why destroy them? And why does this happen not in one country, but everywhere, at the same moment in history? Because between the late 1800s and early 1900s, the world went through something historians rarely talk about: a global architectural amnesia, a sweeping effort to remove, simplify, and erase the remaining fingerprints of a civilization that did not fit the narrative. It wasn't just bridges, it was towers, monuments, domes, power stations, arcades, rail depots, all stripped of their Tartarian complexity and rebuilt with industrial simplicity. Everywhere you look, the ornate becomes plain, the mysterious becomes modern, the ancient becomes newly stamped with a date. This wasn't renovation, this was sanitization, a cleansing of the old world. And the bridges, the veins of that civilization, were among the first to be rewritten, because a civilization's bridges reveal more than its roads or walls. They reveal its understanding of geometry, its mastery of materials, its control of natural forces, its technological soul. If someone wanted to erase that civilization, they would start with its bridges. And that is exactly what happened. The bridge you're thinking about right now, the one that doesn't make sense, is not alone. There are dozens, hundreds, each one repeating the same story. Too big, too perfect, too old, too advanced, too mysterious, too quickly renovated after photography appeared. Almost like someone saw the world being photographed for the first time and panicked. In the next part, we'll examine these alterations even more closely. The disappearing towers, the removed carvings, the stripped metal fixtures, the erased foundations, and ask the question no historian wants to address. What were these bridges really designed for? Because crossing rivers may not have been the primary purpose, and once you understand that, the entire world changes. When you begin studying ancient bridges closely enough, a disturbing pattern emerges, one so consistent and so global that it becomes impossible to wave away as coincidence. A pattern of removal, of disappearance, of someone, somewhere, going out of their way to simplify structures that were anything but simple. Because if you compare photographs of these bridges from the early 1800s and early 1900s, the era right when photography first captured the world, you immediately notice something wrong. The bridges were different. Not just different, astonishingly different. They had towers, they had pinnacles, they had spires and domes and relief carvings so intricate they looked like miniature cathedrals suspended above rivers. Delicate latticework in stone and metal, geometric symbols etched into arches, fresco-like engravings running along the parapets, repeating mathematical sequences that show up in sacred geometry. But when you compare those images to the same bridges today, almost all of it is gone. The statues, removed. The relief carvings, chiseled away. The metal rods, extracted. The strange symbols, sanded off. The smaller towers, demolished quietly. The decorative elements, replaced with plain stone or worse, cheap cement. Why? Why erase beauty? Why strip the soul from structures that had stood for centuries? And here's the part most people don't know. These removals happened globally within a 50-year window, from roughly 1880 to 1930, the same period when the last traces of Tartarian cities were being destroyed, simplified, or modernized. Bridges in France, Germany, Italy, Russia, Armenia, India, China, the Balkans, the Caucasus, even South America, all stripped of their ornate original designs at the same moment in time. And the official explanation? Maintenance, safety upgrades, modern aesthetic, structural concerns, unnecessary ornamentation. But none of those explanations make sense. Statues don't cause bridge failures. Ornate railings don't compromise integrity. Carved stones don't spontaneously become dangerous. If anything, the removals were more dangerous because they required dismantling centuries-old engineering that was functioning perfectly. So, what were they really removing? That's where the evidence becomes chilling. Because when you zoom into the old photographs of the carvings that used to exist, you notice something strange about the designs. The patterns are not random, they're mathematical. repeating geometric ratios, symmetrical spirals found in sacred geometry, odd shapes resembling tuning forks, waveguides, or energy channels. Rosette designs identical to those carved into ancient cathedrals and domes, structures believed to manipulate acoustics or atmospheric energy. These weren't decorations. They were signatures, the same architectural fingerprint found in Tartarian buildings across the world. So imagine you're rewriting history. Imagine you're trying to erase the memory of a civilization that understood energy, resonance, water dynamics, geometric amplification. Where would you start? You'd start with the places where their technology was most visible. And in the old world, that meant the bridges. Because unlike palaces or towers, bridges reveal everything: the foundation, the stonework, the geometry, the interaction with water. It's all exposed, all open, all measurable. If someone wanted to hide Tartaria, they would start with its bridges, and they did. Let me give you the most shocking example. In dozens of old bridge photos, you can clearly see metal rods, sometimes even full metallic frameworks, embedded directly into the stone arches. They're not modern rebar. They're too ornate. They're too precisely shaped. They appear to be cast, not forged. Some have small spherical endings. Some look like tuning rods. Some look like grounding antennas. Historians usually call these decorative metalwork. But why embed decorative metal inside stone? Why cast metal into the keystone? Why engrave symbols along metal rails no one could see from ground level? It wasn't decoration. It was function. The next question becomes, why remove it? Because metal embedded in stone can do something interesting. It can carry vibration. It can channel energy. It can amplify natural resonance. And what are bridges always built over? Water, flowing rivers, moving current. Water is one of the most powerful natural resonators on Earth. Its motion generates frequency. Its flow generates charge. Its surface carries vibration. If Tartarian architecture used resonance, as many researchers now believe, then bridges may have been much more than crossings. They may have been energy nodes, harmonic amplifiers, frequency stabilizers, or even transmitters within a broader atmospheric grid. But today, none of that remains. Not a single bridge retains its original metal latticework. Not a single ornate pattern survives untouched. Not a single symbolic carving remains in its original form. Almost as if someone systematically removed every piece that could reveal how the system worked. And then something even more bizarre came up during my research. In many cities, when these bridges were stripped during the late 1800s and early 1900s, the removed material, statues, metal rods, stonework, was never catalogued, not sold, not stored, not placed in museums. It simply vanished. Entire tons of carved stone, gone. Wagon loads of metal rods, gone. Dozens of statues, gone. Ask yourself, where did it all go? Why does no city have archives of removed pieces? Why were they not preserved? Why do they appear in no auctions, no restorations, no architectural salvage yards? It's as if the goal wasn't renovation, but erasure. And when you compare multiple cities, multiple countries, multiple continents, the timing is identical. Almost as if a silent order was given, a coordinated effort launched, a global directive sent out. Simplify the bridges, remove the clues, erase the fingerprints, rewrite the past. We're left today with what I can only describe as architectural corpses, skeleton versions of what once stood. Beautiful, yes, but incomplete, emptied, sanitized, stripped of their meaning. And once you see this pattern, you realize something devastating. Every bridge we think of as ancient, is likely a fragment, a surviving piece of something far greater that once existed.